now that more and more young men are seeking testosterone treatment.
Yeah, we talked about this yesterday too.
Yeah. I'm concerned because they're not going to have adequate sperm when they get around to having a child. So
I've been on some of these online Reddit forums that talk about testosterone, and it's I don't know if you're familiar with Reddit, but it's basically like a website where people can go and just talk about any topic, and it gets deep, it gets into the weeds. But there's lots of kids on there in like the bodybuilding communities who are in their late teens, early 20s, that are, a lot of them even, some not, but some getting their blood work done beforehand and having abysmal testosterone levels. They're talking about how their testosterones are in like the 1 to 200s nanograms per deciliter, which is on the very, very bottom of the scale that the CDC recommends. And these guys getting on testosterone because it's like, what's the trade-off? Like, do I start testosterone therapy and feel great, feel like a normal person, and be able to go to the gym and be healthy, and sacrifice not being able to have kids? Like, it's a very heated sort of topic because there's an obvious trade-off to doing that, but there's a huge advantage to doing it too, because you feel so good when people feel so good when they do it.
Yeah. So the information I have about testosterone, which is increasing as I study this more, is that it is declining just as sperm count is declining, and probably at a comparable rate. And because we know that many environmental chemicals have the ability to lower testosterone, it's very plausible that that's why this is happening, right?
Right.
But that doesn't actually prove it. We have to do something similar, that we did with, for example, in those Rochester young men. I'm just getting an idea here. We might be able to do this.
What could we do?
We could maybe, if we have those samples still stored, measure the testosterone, which we didn't do, in those young men and relate it to their mother's phthalates, which we did measure.
Right.
Remember I told you that and wow, maybe we've just started a study here.
Oh, wow. We got your next book.
Yeah. That would be really, really interesting. Or maybe not in these men, but some population where we knew, prenatal exposure, because I do think that that's where it's happening. And then we have measured testosterone, maybe at several points in a young man's life, to see whether there's a relationship. So that's I give that out to people as if they were listening, if they can do a study, they could contact me and we'll work on it together.
Yes, we'll include your contact information below for people to email you. So testosterone, sperm count is declining currently by 2.5% per year. How do you know what the number is for testosterone? How that's declining per year?
The study, no. And the studies on testosterone are not recent. They're not as recent as the ones in sperm. That little upgrade we did with that news.
Yes.
Yeah. We haven't done that for testosterone.
Okay.
So we will do that. And then I can come back and tell you the answer.
Okay. So testosterone is very much linked to cardiovascular health, cognitive function, many things.
Yes. And by the way, so is sperm count.
Really?
Yes.
I thought sperm count was just because it was tied to testosterone.
That's hard to separate, isn't it? Because they're intimate. It's one that kind of confounding we were talking about. But I will tell you that there's a number of studies now that show that men with low sperm count have more cardiovascular disease, have more diabetes, have more reproductive cancers, and die younger.
Interesting.
So it's a marker of overall health, right? As is infertility, as is women's infertility, by the way. So all of these things are not, they don't stand alone. It's part of a mixed, a complicated picture where they're all interrelated.
Right.
Yeah.
I wonder if you had somebody who went through, like a young boy who went through chemotherapy and that killed all his sperm, and he wasn't able to produce sperm anymore, because I know that happens to young boys, like kids who go through chemo, they're infertile after that. I wonder if that is if that's the same, if it still correlates to a shorter lifespan or shorter, or worse cardiovascular health because of that?
Great question.
Or if it has to be through the
You're just
environment?
designing all these studies here. No, it's a very good question. And by the way, I have a friend, a young man who did go through chemo as a child for cancer, and he did bank some sperm. And
really?
Yeah, and he was told that he was azospermic, had no sperm in the sample, but in fact he did conceive a child.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
How did that happen?
Well, they missed it. Counting is not you can't be guaranteed of counting every sperm, and he had some left.
So even if you have one, there's a chance?
It's possible. It's possible, and he lucked out. And he is very well and healthy, and, I'm happy to say.
Yeah.
So it is not an absolute.
Who was the name? Oh, I'm sorry. We talked about him last night. Who was the name of the gentleman who did the studies on the frogs that turned the frogs homosexual?
Tyrone Hayes.
Tyrone Hayes. Okay, and he's at Berkeley. Right?
He's at Berkeley, yeah.
Okay, cool. And what are the specific chemicals that he induced into these frogs?
He studied atrazine.
Atrazine. And atrazine, that's
the one that we showed was related to sperm count in men.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, so I wanted to ask you about glyphosate and Roundup.
Yeah.
What specifically did you find out about glyphosate and Roundup?
So surprisingly, glyphosate, Roundup have been one of the most poorly studied pesticides out there. And given that it's the most widely used pesticide in the world, makes you wonder why. But there are now studies going on, and we have some pilot data showing that glyphosate exposure does affect anogenital distance. But in these studies, which are small, and I won't, put a lot behind this, these were the females that were affected.
Okay.
And they had longer AGD.
Longer AGD.
And
so they're more masculine.
Yes.
Interesting.
So a chemical can be anti-androgenic, knock down androgens, knock down testosterone, or it can be pro-androgenic, increase testosterone. So anything that increases testosterone will make girls' anogenital distance, gooch, longer, more in the male direction because they're getting more testosterone, right?
Right.
Right?
Can that happen to men too?
No, because they're already so high that the amount that can be increased by an exposure won't matter, right? But if you're very low and you get an increase, it could double your exposure, you see.
Right.
And so, but this is very, very tentative, and this is an area of very, current study that people are looking at the effects of glyphosate in various ways. One, on the microbiome, on, obesity, on lots and lots and lots of things. It's one of the hot new topics in the field.
Yes.